Alright, I'm going to start up. The first thing I'm going to do is I just gave you this handout and I want to go over it with you. And in fact, I won't even give you this one. I'll give you the email that I have, because evidently I heard about this before but don't remember it. Alright, this was back in September. Hi Sharon, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. So what happened was this woman contacted BTC, and I really wish that those people who contact BTC would be given my name, but instead they're given the internship coordinator. And Carrie's fine, I have no problem with her, but I guess I wasn't aware of this. So I got this email from her during the break that's saying, basically, hi, it's been a while since we've been in contact. I found this email. We've been interested in discussing an internship. We are a fast-growing company. We are in the process of recruiting a C#, .NET, and Visual Studio programmer. Alright, so here is their current posting. And evidently they haven't found someone that met their needs. So they're offering it out to the school, and my guess is that if you were to get the job as an internship and they were happy with the work that you did, my guess is there's at least a chance they could offer you full-time employment. Now, it doesn't say that on here, but that's usually the way these things work, that a person will get a job in some kind of a capacity where they're doing an internship, and they'll either like you or they won't like you. All right? And if there is work after the internship, then normally they will offer that job or at least ask you to apply if they're happy with the job you've done. That should make sense to everybody. So here's our current posting. Experience using ASP.NET using the C# programming language. You have that. Strong knowledge of the visual development environment. You have that. Creative development of websites and web environments. You have that. Good experience with MSQL Server and transactional SQL. What transactional SQL is usually referred to as TSQL. And it's a way that you can literally write code, write scripts that you can use with SQL Server. Now that, you'd have to say at best, you're light on. We looked a little bit at how you create scripts in MySQL, and it's very similar in this one. All right? And as it says, it's a great opportunity to work and develop in Azure Cloud Services. So it would be another notch on your tool belt, whatever you want to call it. So it says, please contact me. I'm supposed to do this. If you have anyone that would qualify and be interested in an internship, I would say if you are interested, rather than emailing her, I would suggest you email me with a copy of your cover letter and a copy of your resume. I will look at it. Why am I saying this? Well, there is I can't say who this is, but it's none of you, it's not in this program. There is another student at Blackhawk who is applying for a job at a company. The person at the company, and all they did was they sent a cover letter and a resume. And the person from that company contacted me because they know me and they know I know the person. It's nobody in your program. All right? And they said, wow, who the heck wrote this? So what I did over the break was I rewrote the person's resume without their knowledge, sent it back to the company, and now they're probably going to end up interviewing the person. All I asked them is if they interview the person, let me know first so I can let the person know what I did. I'm not trying to do anything backdoor or underhanded. I wanted to get the person an interview. And with the way their resume currently existed, they weren't going to get one. All right, if you would have seen the resume, you would probably know why. They used turquoise in a bunch of it. You know, their bullets and some of their headings they did in turquoise, which really was a real light turquoise, and you could barely read it. It just looked bad. So all I'm saying is, if you want to say, you know, if you want to go and send this woman, Sharon at SACID, whatever it is, .com, then do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. I would suggest if you're interested, you first send me a copy of your up-to-date resume. Because guess what? You're supposed to do that for the 182 class anyway. All right? I will look at it, update it, and if I make changes to it, I'll send it back to you. And whatever you give it to me, I'll send it back to you in the same name, -edited. So Mark gives me his resume, and it says, you know, Mark Lestarge resume. He'll get it back as Mark Lestarge -edited. All right? And you can either incorporate the changes I want, but it's your resume. If you say, heck with you, mine's good the way it was, then send it out like that. All right, if you give me a cover letter, I will look at that also. I've worked with a couple of you in here already when you send cover letters out electronically. All right, and I know nothing about the company. Sassid Insurance Development. All right, and you know, people when they hear stuff like this, oh my God, I don't want to work and do insurance. You're not selling insurance. You're writing code that's going to be used by insurance companies. All right, Mark was showing me, and hopefully I'm not talking out of turn, Mark. He was showing me what he's working on for his internship earlier today, and he's working with Anders, who's in the afternoon class, and it's something having to do with the automotive industry. Mark ain't about to sell cars or start fixing them. He's writing an app, not even an app, I guess an application, more or less, that's going to help them. All right, so the same kind of thing. It's always worth your time to at least look through it, and if you decide, hey Jeff, I listened to your shtick, I'm just sending a resume out to the person, I sent it out, it must have been good because they want me in there tomorrow. Okay? That happens, by all means, look at this site first. Okay? At least have an idea of what they're doing. Okay? So go in there and don't walk in there just, well, I saw you're in insurance development. Yeah, what else do you know about our company? Well, I know you're in insurance development. Yeah, but what else? But I know you're in insurance development. That doesn't play real well. All right, and maybe I told you this, maybe I didn't, but years ago, when my second job interview, after I got my 2-year degree, was with the Manitowoc Company. They make ice machines. This was back in 1982. We didn't have the internet the way we have it right now. And I was in there, and the guy was like, he started asking me questions about the company, and he just stopped, and he goes, you don't have a flaming clue what we do here, do you? And I was real honest. I said, no, but I want to learn. And I sounded enthusiastic. Guess what? They still offered me the job. I didn't get it because I didn't want it. I'd already taken another job while I was waiting. But it was good because I found out they interviewed 35 people for two positions. And I was one of the people they offered a job to. That made me feel good. All right. All right. So that said, I'm going to go into Chapter 3 today. Now remember, last week, we covered Chapter 1, which was Advanced PHP Techniques. The lecture should be out there. The code should be out there on both the P drive and on Blackboard. Then on Thursday, we went over Chapter 2, which was Developing Web Applications. All right, same thing. P drive, Blackboard. Today we're going to go over Chapter 3. That's out on the P drive. It's not yet out on Blackboard. All right. And Thursday we're going to go over Chapter 4. Then, as we mentioned, next week, 5 and 6. The following week, 7 and 8. The following week, just Chapter 9. And if there's time, we'll also go over 14. Then I am going to go over a project that I've been working on with you. I'm taking one of these Udemy classes online, and I'm modifying the heck out of the project. And I'm going to give it to you. So if you say, well, you know, I don't really know what I want to do for a project, this would be another one that you'll be able to update if you want to. Okay? All right, that'll bring us again, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. It'll put us about around week 6, 7, or 8, somewhere in there. So you'll have at least half the semester where you come in here and you'll be working on your project. Now, if it turns out that it's crummy outside or you don't feel good and you don't come in, I am still taking attendance. All right. Now, Kelly, for example, is a little different because, if you haven't heard, his father-in-law is ailing. So he's there to be with him and with his wife. All right. But he'll be back as soon as he can. But other people who are in this class, 10% minimum of your grade is going to be based on attendance. And what we're supposed to really start cracking down on is just because you tape your classes, Jeff, if students don't come and they don't come at all, you're supposed to start taking off. This is what we heard. All right. So, again, I'm going to go into Chapter 3 today. As I already mentioned to you, there is a folder out there with today's date on it, on the in-class folder on the P drive. There's actually Thursdays is out there too. And it's 1/20/2015, and then Thursdays will be 1/22/2015. What's out there right now is this CH03 folder. what I would like you to please do is to go out to the P drive, grab that folder, and copy it, get into the virtual desktop, and copy it to your htdocs folder. So here's the path to it. No, that's not it. So that's it right there. I'll make it a little bit bigger so hopefully you can see it okay. All right? So P drive, CIS 152.164 DIP, Spring 2015 in class. It's got today's date on it. If you just grab that folder, or you can go inside of it and grab the CH03 folder. If you want to do that, that's fine. Copy that then, copy it over to your htdocs folder. Does that all make sense? I don't want you to do anything with it yet because I want to explain what I did and how I did it. Does that make sense? All right, while you're doing that, and let Zach get caught up. Found out what the problem is, Zach. Yep, the problem is, for some reason, when you took a job here as an intern, they've started. You see one of those, and I see the other one. Yeah, that's not happened before. Yeah. No, he's got a fix, but I'm supposed to talk to you about it first, and I'll explain it to you during the break and see what you say. All right? So this is what we've done. We've gone out to the P drive for this class, start up the virtual desktop, copy over the CH03 folder, so that folder right there. So if you go all the way out, if you go all the way out to here, you'll see there's a CH03 folder. If you just grab that folder, start up your virtual desktop, copy that folder to on your virtual desktop to your XAMPP htdocs folder. All right? It might be that it's your regular desktop because that's, but I don't think that would be able to. It should be. Well, that sure isn't it. Oh, there's not that. Go back. Yeah, you can do that. Unless you got something to stop it. I don't think that's it either. All right, go back again. Did you try to copy it or did you try to move it? Okay. Says you got 3 meg for me. Okay, that's it. htdocs. Yeah, that should have anything to do with it. That's the system problem. Just for now, okay, why don't you try to see if you can right mouse click on the CH01 folder. Okay, choose properties. There's nothing in there either. Tell you what, for right now, just copy it to your regular desktop, which is your D drive. So you're not going to be able to do this, but we're going to have to. So just right mouse click on it. Choose paste. Okay, you're going to have to look at it through there, and I'll go up during the break and try to talk to them. I've never seen that error before. All right, everybody else, were you all able to do that okay? Anybody have a problem? Anybody else? All right. So first thing I want to do is I want to mention to you this chapter. If you hear this, this particular chapter is broken up into 3 sections. All right. It's called Advanced Database Concepts, but most of the chapter is not on database. I don't know why they called it that, but they did. All right. The first thing they talk about is storing sessions in a database. That is. Then they talk about working with zip codes. Then they talk about creating stored functions. Don't worry about that last one, displaying results. The point is, if you follow my instructions, everything that we're doing on here should work. All right? And no one's brought it up yet, brought up the old elephant in the room. As soon as Seattle scored and it was 16-7, I told my wife the Packers are going to lose, and I didn't watch another minute of it. Okay? I'm just saying. I told her as soon as they scored, I said, they're going to lose. She came up from downstairs and said they lost in overtime. And she was like, you're not even mad. I said, no, because I primed myself that they were going to lose. All right. So what I want to show you that's in here, though, is this. Where are we? I just can't get used to that different icon for the virtual desktop. I never know which one to click. I don't know why, but whatever reason. All right. When we look in here and we look at what's in Chapter 3, you'll notice there's another one of these .sql files. And if you look at it, what you'll notice is I added some of these comments, and some of these comments were from Ullman. All right? We're going to open this file in just a minute. And please look at what we're going to do, okay? For the first part of the chapter, we're just going to highlight this stuff up to here. Everybody see where I'm highlighted up to? And what that's going to do is that's going to grab that database we created last time, that task DB. It's going to add a new table to it called sessions, and that's all it's going to do. That's all we need to do for the first part of the chapter. Does that make sense? All right. Then, after we do that, we're going to create, for the second part of the chapter, we're going to create a new database. All right. The database is called Zips. We're going to use it. We're going to do a bunch of other stuff, but before you do this, after you create this, don't do this part yet, because I'm going to have you copy a file from one place to another place. Did you hear that? So if you try to do it, you're going to get error messages. It'll build the table, then as soon as you try to load it, it'll start giving you error messages. So we don't want to do that. All right, then we're going to put that in, and then we'll copy this stuff in. I want to mention this to you, though. It may not sound like a big thing, but I want you to see this. See that right there? That's the file we're going to end up loading. That is actually an Excel file that's been saved in comma-separated format. All right, why am I telling you this? Because this is the file. So you notice if we go through here, there are 42,523 records. All right? If you're smart, don't do what your instructor did and do a select star from that. Because I did. And it took about 10 minutes before it stopped printing on screen. All right, so I've told you that. If you're going to do it anyway, then do it. All right? All right, then I'm going to jump back. And can you give one of these to Zach, please? Talked about it at the beginning of the period, Zach, that this company right here, they're looking for an intern who wants to do some C# development. So if you're interested, you know, I recommend that people send me a copy of the resume and cover letter. I'll look at it, pretty it up if need be, and if not, I won't. All right, and then we'll send it in. All right. And that was what we looked at. So get rid of that, get rid of that. All right, come back to here. All right. So the author mentions, and I don't want to read to you, this book is on more advanced concepts than the book we used last semester. All right? What he's going to do with these sessions is he's going to show you another way that you can store session information. And that is by putting it into a database. All right? So that's what we're going to do first. The second, when he talks about working with zip codes, that big file that I just showed you has got zip codes from all over the United States. And the idea is that's a free database. I'll even show you where that database is in just a couple minutes. All right, but the idea is you can use any two zip codes to figure out. So let's say I was in Janesville, Wisconsin, and I wanted to go someplace to Portland, Oregon. I can give it a couple different zip codes, and it can calculate roughly the distance between those. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. The way that they use it in here is they create a database called stores. All right? And then what they do is they try to let you see what store is closest to where you currently are. Does that make sense? So we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the last thing that's in here, creating stored functions, is kind of what I just mentioned to you on that ad from that person who talked about the Transact SQL. It's sort of along those lines. All right. So that's what we're going to cover. Plus the last thing, if we look at way at the end of the chapter, just so you see this, is they say, you know, normally you're used to this when you go and so if I come in here and do this. All right, so I got to start up XAMPP shell, oops, MySQL minus U root. Can't connect. Oh, because I better start it up first. How's that? You can do it. We're going to do it later otherwise. All right. So if I use the task database, okay, and I say select star from sessions. That's empty. What else is in there? Okay. You see what it looks like. It's that format. Basically, it runs like this, right? You get a whole row that's got a record, another row that's got a record. You don't have a lot of control over how it prints. All right. In other words, it just prints horizontally, then horizontally, then horizontally. Would you agree with that? What they have you do at the end of the chapter here is what you end up printing is you can do it in a vertical format. So when you do this, you see, no, it's still in the other one. No, it's going to print across a row. But notice it's going to print a bunch of them, and it allows you to do some formatting. That's all. All right? So I don't really care that much. We'll talk about it at the end. It actually does work. As far as I know, everything that's in here, if you do it the way I tell you, it all should work. All right? So the first thing he talks about in here is storing sessions in a database. Again, not my goal in here to read to you. Okay? But he does mention why would you store things in sessions in a database? Notice here. Okay? I've been doing so much reading online lately, and what they're telling people is, hey, before you go in for a job interview, if it's anything IT, at least have an idea of what security is. If you're going in for a programming job, you may be asked, how would you program this to make it more secure? If you're going in for an analyst type of job, same kind of thing. All right? So by putting the information into a database, it's much more secure than sending it over the wire, where if it's sent, for example, with a GET, you're going to be able to see it in the query string. Or if it's sent with a POST, where somebody might be able to grab tools and go in there and still dig out the information. So that's the main reason for doing it. All right? Another reason it says is it allows you to easily retrieve more information about your website stuff in general. And third, as it says, if you've got a site that's running on multiple servers, the same user may be fed pages from different servers. Does that make sense to people that if I am out there working on a system, and let's say that I'm doing a lot of talk, me back and forth, between me and Amazon. Let's say I'm a bigger customer than just Jeff Scott. All right, so let's say that it's something like Walmart, for example, where I'm ordering stuff in mass from Amazon. Let's just pretend for now I'm doing that. That if I'm going through there and I'm doing a bunch of complicated stuff and making a bunch of orders, the chance of all that stuff that I'm working on being handled by a single server is basically none. Does that make sense to people? All right, because with Amazon, they're not going to store everything for all their products on one server. That wouldn't make sense. First of all, you need a humongous server, and what would you do if it went down? Type of thing. All right. So what they're talking about here is there's a chance if you're doing complex enough work that you might be working with multiple servers. All right. And rather than having some of your information stored on this server and some of your information stored on this server and some stored on that server, you could copy all that information and put it in a central place like a database. And that's what they talk about right here. All right. So the author mentioned starting on the middle there of page 82 on the right-hand side, to store this stuff in a database, you've got to create at least one table. He keeps it bare bones, as simple as possible right here. So he says we're going to have a table called session that has 3 different fields in it. All right, the session ID, the text that's involved in the session, and the timestamp, so the last time the session was accessed. So again, the idea is we're going to be able to throw whatever we want to throw in here. That's the key thing. All right. So the first thing he has you do, and again, if you look up on the screen here, this is also the first thing that I put in here, and that is this part, which is just going up to right here, the first 17 lines, which are activating our TaskDB database that we created last time, creating a table called sessions, all right, and literally just setting it up. So if you haven't done so, get into the virtual desktop. I'm taking for granted that everybody has done that, all right, except somebody who is, throughout no fault of their own, for some reason it's not letting them store things in their htdocs folder, all right, and we'll try to fix that during the break. But then I want you to go into that CH03 folder and open up the file that's called CH03.SQL. I suggest you open that file up in Notepad++. CH03, it's the only, it looks different, it looks like it's got a little database icon on it. All right. So if you open that up, please look up on the screen here. The other thing you're going to have to do, and you don't have to do it this way, but to me it's the easiest way, is go back into your XAMPP control panel, click shell, and type in mysql -u root, all right, which will get you in, and then use taskdb. So you have to type in that command right there, mysql -u root, and use taskdb semicolon. Can you go on to what? That's a good question. You know what? You might be able to. But what you're going to have to do then is open it up first in the D drive and then still come up and do it the way we've been doing it. That may work. All right. Use TaskDB. That's the one that we created last week. Now, if you weren't here last week, probably don't have that database. Did you try it? No, don't worry about that. That's what you, no, you don't want to change from it. No, you don't want to change it. But I thought what you meant is this. You may be able to still copy that if you copied it. Hit right mouse. Yeah, I would get out of there. No, right? No. You gotta do another MySQL -u. Did everybody copy that to your desktop? All right. I mean, not to the desktop. I'm saying just copy it. Just highlight the stuff that I told you to copy. Those first 17 lines and do a copy. However you do your copy. All right. You see that? Now use task DB. Now everybody's done that. Okay. So then what you can do, and I'm not going, I'll show you what to do, but I'm not going to do it, So you right mouse click on here and choose copy, or you do an edit copy or whatever. So I'll copy, and then you want to come through here and you want to paste it in. So in other words, from right here, I'd want to right mouse click and choose paste. I don't want to do that because I already have the table. All right. In fact, you know what? I can remove the table. There's nothing in it anyway. So I will drop table sessions. Okay, it's dropped. Now I'm going to right mouse click and choose paste. Exactly what I told you to do. Just hit enter when you get done. And if it comes back and it looks like this, and it says 0 rows affected like this, it worked. All right? So what we've just done is we just added a new table to our database called sessions. The only thing we previously had there was tasks. You got to hit enter. If it stopped right there and you still have the semicolon, you have to hit enter. Yes. Yes. If it stopped right here, then you got to hit enter. Yes. Because I didn't put a blank line in there. All right. You had that same problem last time. Wondering if there's something hosed on that machine. All right. Did everybody else's work? Anybody else's not work? All right, then let's stop for a second and see if we can figure out why that didn't work. Oh, you got it. It's because, I'll tell you what, because you didn't put a semicolon after it. You used task DB. This all thinks it's one line of code. You got to quit. Just exit. Just put the exit. Go back into your bring it up again. Minus Q, minus U. That one you don't put a semicolon for. Now we use task DB semicolon. All right, so everyone's worked now, correct? Okay, then let's go back into the book. All right, so he shows you how to go through here. He has you do it in test. We created another database. It's no biggie. All right, and he explains in here what the things that are in here are. We can describe it like he shows if we wanted to. So we can say DESC sessions. You don't have to do this, but it just shows you what you put in there. 3 fields: ID, data, and last accessed. ID is a 32-character field. That's the primary key. All right. Data is text, and it can't be null. All right. Yes, it can be null. And last access is a timestamp. All right. We're going to throw some junk in there because we're going to follow his steps in just a couple minutes. All right. I don't want it, like I said, not my intention here to read to you. There's just not enough time. And guess what? I'm not that good a reader. All right? Thank you. So the author says it's a 2-part process here. We have to define the functions we want to use to interact with a database, and then we have to tell PHP to use these functions. So take a look at the chart here that you see on the right-hand side of the screen. These are basically the 5 different operations that you're going to have with sessions. You can start a session, you can close a session, you can read to a session, you can write from a session, you can destroy a session. Does that make sense? And the other one, you say, what about that one? It says old session data should be deleted. Garbage collection. We'll get to that in just a minute. But the point is, what you see there on the top of page 84 are really the different things that can happen with a session. All right? And the author, Ullman, does a good job here of explaining that when you're working with the stuff that's in here, it says the set session handler function is used. All right? It says this function can be called with 6 arguments, each one a function name, to handle all 6 of these conditions that you see right here. All right? Now, notice I'm down near the bottom of the left-hand side on page 84. It says it helps to understand when these different things are called. So what you see right here, this stuff right there, is what you see right there for that picture. Does that make sense to people? All right. Because do you want to keep session data in a database indefinitely? The answer is maybe. Depends on who you are. All right, but if you're a mom and pop company or if you're doing it on your own server and it's a small server, no, because eventually you run out of room. And do I really want to keep track of something where somebody comes out to my site in 2015 and orders something and then doesn't order something again until 2050? All right, I might have a certain amount of time where if there has been no activity, I just remove it or I remove them. Does that make sense? All right. So as it says, when you start a session, the open and read are called automatically and immediately. All right. It says when the read function is called, garbage collection may take place. What's garbage collection? We already know this from Java. It'll look through there and it'll see if there's any old stuff, so to speak, that isn't required anymore. And if that's the case, it'll basically destroy what's not needed. All right. Now that's a very generic explanation. You can go online and find much better explanation than the one I just gave you. When the script terminates, the write is called, then the close is called. If the session is destroyed, well, that's going to depend on how you've got your sessions set up. All right? But if it's destroyed, as it says, the write is not invoked, but the destroy is going to be called, followed by closed. So this is something that you're going to have to sit there and work with other people on, maybe your end user or whatever, to figure out what their wants, needs, and desires are. All right? So he comes through here on page 85 and says, now we want to talk about the new session handlers. And you may or may not have noticed this, but if you look right here, he's going to create, he already has a database connection that's called DBC. He's going to create another one that's just going to work with sessions. All right, so they'll have their own database connection because you may have the database open, but the session stuff may be closed. So you want to use two different connections, and that's what he talks about in here. All right, so he sets it up, and the first thing he does is he sets it to null because he hasn't made the connection yet. All right, now you can, I'm going to give you a second. Just read these comments if you would. These are the ones that are in your book on page 85 on the bottom of the page. And if you don't want to read them from there, you can go look at the on screen. What's going to be in here, just so you know, are all of these handlers. And you'll see them in just a couple minutes. All right, so here's the open session. So when we open a session, we're passing in that sessions database connection, and now we're going to actually set it. Again, ours would, of course, would be localhost root blank task DB. Does that make sense? So I had to go in and change all those to get it to work for us. All right. Then when we look in here, so that's the open, and we return true. There's our close. That's pretty simple. Then there's our read. Query the database and get all the information. Now, when we do this, we do a select from, we should be getting back just one record. So if it equals 1, all right, give it to us. Otherwise, it'll be an empty string, so there's nothing to return. So we might call this in a loop, but the idea is we're only getting a record at a time back from this. All right, here's our write session. This has got a new function in it. This stuff is all explained in your book on pages 85, then turning up to 88, 89, 90, 91, 93, 94, and 95. So I'm giving you the highlights, for lack of better words. Okay? But this is all explained in here. But I do want to mention, and I can't remember what page it's on, but I'll find it, that one of the things that's mentioned in here is, if you look on screen here, please look up on screen, or again, on the bottom of page 86 in your book. And that is, notice what we're saying here, replace into sessions. All right? And what that's going to basically end up doing is either putting in our new session information, or if there's nothing, it's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to remove what was there before. All right. This replace into is mentioned in your book. Of course, I can't find it right now, but it's in here someplace. If anybody sees it, feel free to shout it out. Of course, they don't put it in the dictionary, or in the index rather, in the back. Close reading. There it is. Okay, turn to page 89, please. And so will I. There it is, right there. It says, this function receives two arguments, the session ID and the session data. All right, it says the lesser known replace query here, if the record exists, okay, an update will occur. Otherwise, a new record will be made. So again, it checks to see if there's already a session ID there. And if there is, it updates it to add this new data. If there's not already a session ID of that created, it creates it and copies in the data. So it's either updating an existing record or it's creating a new one. All right? And that's what the author is talking about right there. All right. There is his destroy session. Okay? Deletes, he removes everything that's in there. Then he sets it the array to a blank, or a session to a blank array that should get rid of just about everything that's in there. Here's clean session. We'll get to that in just a minute. All right. So these are all of his functions to do everything. Delete old sessions. This is basically his garbage stuff that he's doing right there. All right. So he's defined all of his functions at the very top. Then he gets down to this. This is the bottom of that routine that you see there on page 87 in the book. He hasn't even started his session yet. He's got to do all this stuff first, because he's got to say, okay, when you make sure when you open the session, you call open session. When you close the session, you call close session. After you open the session, call read session. Anytime you have to write, call write session. Anytime you want to get rid of a session, you call destroy session. And anytime you want to do any garbage collection, you call clean session. That's what he's saying. All right? And then, finally, after he's done that stuff, then he calls session start. There's nothing here. He's not writing anything here, and there's no HTML. That's why it works to do it in this order. If you don't do it that way, what he says is it won't work. You have to define all that stuff before you start your session. He mentions all of that stuff in here. And then if you do turn up all the way to page 90, if you would, please. He mentions on page 90, he talks a little bit about garbage collection. All right. And then he says why you have to do that session handling functions, where you have them, and then calling session start. So he does probably a much better job of explaining. I wanted to show you in the code what was happening there. Does that make sense? All right. But hopefully that makes some sense as far as what's going on there. Now, is that simple to understand? No. And I'm not saying that it is. All right. But just so you know, that particular routine, and you can all do what I'm about to do, okay? That particular routine, that whole file that we just looked at, is under database _ sessions _ inc.php. All right, that whole thing is in there. Everybody hear what I just said? All right, we don't have to run that file. Why? Because remember, it's a .inc.php file. So if we look and we go up all the way to page 91, notice we've got this file called sessions.php. Notice on page 92, what's one of the first things it does? Is it adds that file for us. All right. Then what he does is he comes in here and he creates some junk data. So he creates some session data in there. Then he prints out a message saying that the session data was stored. All right. Otherwise, if it already existed, he's going to print that out. The session already exists. And he provides logout capability. If you say, I don't have a flippin' clue as to what you're talking about, then let's do it this way. All right. This is sessions.php. I'm taking for granted that everybody in here, because I asked you to do this before, that everybody in here started up XAMPP. All right, so if you started up XAMPP, then what I want you to do is bring up your browser of choice in XAMPP and your http://localhost/ch03. And if you do that, it'll come up and it'll show you all of this stuff. If it's on your, see, this is where yours is going to break down because it needs to read it from htdocs, so I don't think it'll work there. All right, now if I go to sessions.php that you see right here, everybody of course is looking up here. So if I take my mouse and put it on where it says sessions.php and open it, there it just did it. So it just created for me some session data. See it? That sessions was just empty. There's, what do we have in here? There's my session ID right there. There's the session data that we put in that goes all the way to right there. And there's the timestamp. Does that make sense? All right. So what we just did was we created a brand new session. There's our data. All right. There's our data. And if I go and refresh this, notice session data exists. It's letting us know that there already is a session with that data in it. Did it add it again? No. It's still what we saw before. All right. Now if we go in there though, and if we click the button that says logout, if you look up on the screen, all right, session destroyed. Now if I come back in here and run this, there's nothing in there. Does that make sense to everybody what just happened? We told it to create a new session, and as we created the new session, we told it to throw those values into the database, which it did. It did it all from the db_sessions.inc.php file. All right, yes. And then what we said was immediately, as soon as we log out, don't keep the data in the session database. Get rid of it right away. We don't have to do that. All right, literally, we could have had a function that we created for that thing that says destroy. We could just have never called it. Or we could have just had in there, your data will never be destroyed. All right, or something like that. But that's the way that Ullman did it in this particular example. Always nice to give the user a heads up and even show them after it's been destroyed, the array's empty. All right? Didn't have to do it that way. There's plenty of different ways that this particular thing could have been done. All right? But he shows you this starting on 91 and going on to 92. Then on 93, starting on 93, he explains step by step. So if you say, okay, I did it, it worked, but I have not a frigging clue as to what you just did, then look at the code on 93, 94, 95, and it'll explain everything that's in here. Also on page 94. First time I did it, I got this. It says, because PHP is nice enough to close database connections after the script runs, the write session and close session functions called at this point would be done without a database connection. So if you call them after you've already closed the database, there's nothing to compare it to. That's, even though the code is correct, if you do things in the wrong order, you're going to get these messages. And notice they're not errors, they're warnings. But they still look bad anyway. All right? All right. So it's a little early. Let's take a break. I think we all need one. Let's come back a little bit after 11, a minute or two after. We'll pick it up on page 96, and we'll go into talking about zip codes.